Greetings to all of my amazing subscribers. Today in this video I'm going to talk about the Great Famine, Black Death, Dancing Mania or Dancing Plague, and we're going to begin here in the Great Famine of 1314. 1314 saw the start of the Great Famine, followed by the Black Death in 1347, with both leaving a trail of death. In the autumn and winter of 1314, Britain experienced a period of extreme wet and bizarre weather. Torrential rain flooded the fields, rotting crops and drowning livestock. The narrative is that in October of 1347, a ship came from the Crimea and Asia and docked in Messina, Sicily. Aboard the ship were not only sailors but rats. The rats brought with them the Black Death, the bubonic plague. Reports came to Europe about the disease that indicated that 20 million people had died in Asia. Okay, so 27 years later begins the Dancing Plague of 1374, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. On a side note, 27 is divisible by 9, and 144, which will be repeated throughout this video, is also divisible by 9. Okay, so back to 1347. Now, if I add 144 years to 1347, I'll land in 1491. So let's see what happened in 1491. And this is freaky stuff, my friends. So not long before the Strasbourg dancing epidemic, an equally strange compulsion had gripped a nunnery in the Spanish Netherlands. In 1491, several nuns were possessed by devilish familiars which impelled them to race around like dogs and jump out of trees in imitation of birds or meow and claw their way up tree trunks in the manner of cats. Such possession epidemics were by no means confined to nunneries, but nuns were disproportionately affected. Over the next 200 years, in nunneries everywhere from Rome to Paris, hundreds were plunged into states of frantic delirium, during which they foamed, screamed, and convulsed, sexually propositioned exorcists and priests, and confessed to having carnal relations with devils or Christ. These events may sound wildly improbable, but there is clear documentary evidence that they did in fact happen. The dancing plagues were independently described by scores of physicians, chroniclers, monks, and priests. And for the 1518 outbreak, we can even read the panicky municipal orders written by the Strasbourg authorities at the time of the epidemic. Similarly, trial documents in the archives of the Inquisition provide copious, in-depth accounts of nuns doing and saying the strangest of things. On another side note, if you take 2040 and subtract 666 years, that brings us to 1374. So we arrive here in 1374, 27 years after the start of the Black Death in 1347. So the year was 1374. In dozens of medieval towns scattered along the valley of the River Rhine, hundreds of people were seized by an agonizing compulsion to dance. Scarcely pausing to rest or eat, they danced for hours or even days in succession. They were victims of one of the strangest afflictions in Western history. And one of the first major outbreaks was in Archaix in the Holy Roman Empire, in modern-day Germany, in Aix-la-Chapelle. And thousands of people were on the streets of Aix-la-Chapelle, and they began to dance without restraint and experienced vivid hallucinations. The victims danced reportedly for hours without stopping. Many collapsed from exhaustion, and some have even suffered fatal consequences. And so I also added 144 years to 1374, which equals 1518. And in 1518, we had the Dancing Plague, which was in Strasbourg. And that was in the modern-day France in the Holy Roman Empire from July 1518 to September 1518. And somewhere between 50 and 400 people took to dancing for weeks. There are many theories behind the phenomenon, but the most popular being stress-induced mass hysteria. And other theories include ergot and religious explanations, but there's controversy as well concerning the number of deaths. But ergot is a fungi, and it belongs to a group of the genus Claviceps, which reminds me of the Netflix series The Last of Us and the cordyceps brain infection. And the Last of Us creator says the cordyceps fungus danger is real, and has always been here. So there's 144 years between 1374 and 1518, and 1518 is a phoenix number. It's 138 times 11. And so the next thing I did was add 144 to 1518, 144 years, which brings us out to 1662, which is just 3 years shy of the Great Plague of London. And I added 360 to 1662, which is 144 times 2.5, which brought us to 2022. And nothing of plague-like proportions occurred in 2022, but if you add the same amount of numbers to 1665, the year of the Great Plague of London, you add 360, which is 144 times 2.5. That brings us out to 2025. And if I add 144 years to 1881, which is a cholera pandemic, we also land in 2025. And some of you may have read the Deagle report from some time back, and we just don't know what that really, the point in having that put out. So just have to wait and see what happens. But the Great Plague of London lasted from 1665 to 1666, and it was the last major epidemic of the bubonic plague to occur in England. Okay, so next we begin to look at a different timeline in 1565, which the plague was brought to Bergen on about the 10th of August by a ship from Danzig, and altogether 1,500 people died of bubonic plague in Bergen, 21 to 25% of its population. The peaks of the epidemic occurred during the autumn months of 1565 and 1566. So the next thing I did was add 144 years to 1565, which brought me out to 1709. In 1709, a plague epidemic followed the Great Northern War, which the Northern War went from 1700 to 1721 between Sweden and the Tsardom of Russia and its allies, killing about 100,000 in Sweden and 300,000 in Prussia. So the plague killed two-thirds of the inhabitants of Helsinki and claimed a third of Stockholm's population. And then I added, of course, 144 years to 1709, which brought me out to 1853. And 1853 marked the peak of the yellow fever epidemic in New Orleans. In that year alone, 7,790 people perished. Yellow fever was so feared that it was often called the American plague, and relatively little was known about the transmission cycle of the disease or how it was spread. So next I added 144 years to 1853, which brought me out to 1997, which is the H5N1 poultry outbreaks, which happened in China and Hong Kong. And this virus would go on to cause more than 860 human infections with a greater than 50% death rate. So you can imagine if this was in another era, things could have been far worse. Looking at a separate date now, in 1876, a plague epidemic in Shushtar, southwest Iran, led to 1,800 deaths out of a population of 8,000 within only a few months. And so I added 144 years to 1876, and that brought me out to 2020, and we all know what was declared worldwide in 2020. And Jason has talked about Nemesis X object in relation to large amounts of human death and strange cigar-shaped objects reported to be seen in the skies prior to these outbreaks of disastrous events worldwide. Reports of rotting animal parts falling from the skies, as you can see depicted in this image. And he's spoken about the 792-year periodicity of Nemesis X. And Nemesis X equals 108 in simple gematria, and X equals 24, which is 8 times 3, 888. And I find all of these numbers highly relevant because there were 2.5 cycles of 144 from 1665 to 2025, which is the only timeline I found that brings us out to a possible major event in 2025. And it doesn't seem to matter as to which year of any specific outbreak I start from, but by adding 144 years or adding and dividing 144, I'm brought to the next outbreak of disastrous plagues, including plagues of bizarre human behaviour. And although it doesn't appear to be the same occurrence as the dancing plagues, in the 1300s and 1400s, we did see a rather strange display of nurses all around the world dancing and recording bizarre TikTok videos of choreographed dance routines during the last few years. And we were told that there was a severe issue with understaffing for obvious reasons. We were shown nurses sleeping in hallways and pushed to their limits physically and mentally. Many of these nurses were unable to attend their shifts due to testing positive, yet the remaining staff seemed to be able to find all of this extra time to choreograph long dance routines. And I personally found this behaviour to be highly ritualistic in nature. And it's possible that what the entire world experienced, which initially began in 2019, was a precursor event for the Nemesis X in 2046, just like the Great Famine in London. 27 years after 3047 begins the Black Death in 1374. And so 2019 is also 27 years before 2046. And 27 is a significant number because 108 is divisible by 27. And in one of my videos, in my last video, I began at 1896 and added 144, which took me out to 2040. And now, like 1902 plus 138 is 2040, obviously. 1902 plus 144 is 2046. And 792, the Nemesis X periodicity, is divided by 144 is 5.5. And 11 times 72 equals 792, the same as like its Nemesis X periodicity. And as I've said before, I like to stick with one cipher, but Chaldean is the only other one I use besides ordinal. And 72 in Chaldean equals Book of Revelation, Christ consciousness, the Book of Enoch, Eye of Providence, coronavirus outbreak, safe and effective direct energy weapon, Maui fire ritual of sacrifice, and April 24th. And April 24th is a date I came up with in my last video, one of my other videos, Warp Speed, a second seal of revelation, for something possibly happening that relates to the T-Man. And the calculations I made were from Friday the 15th of May 2020, which was Operation Warp Speed, the announcement of Operation Warp Speed, plus 1,440 days, which brought me out 24th of April 2024. As you can see, the number 144 here again. You just drop the 0. April 24th, equals 72 in Chaldean, and 72 is half of 144. But yeah, I just find it interesting that that there's 27 years from 2019 to 2046, just the same as the Black Death in 1347. 27 years later begins the dancing plagues of 1374. Another interesting fact is that 1890 plus 144 times 2 equals 2178, and 2106 is 72 years, which is half of 144, before 2178. So yeah, I find that interesting also. Anyway, I think that's it. That's what I've got for you all today, and thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a great day or night, and I'll see you on the next one.